Thank you for joining us for the 19th Annual Town History Series at the Patent Free Library. My name is Mary Kate Kwasnick, and I'm the Archivist and Special Collections Librarian in the Saginaw History and Genealogy Room at the library. The library is so happy that you could join us today. Before I introduce today's speaker, I just have a few important bits of information to share. I want to thank all of the historical societies of our member towns for selecting our wonderful speakers this year and for helping to get the word out. Thank you to Peter Goodwin, former manager of the History Room and founder of the Town History Series. Thank you also to the Bath Historical Society for generously offering to professionally film every program in this year's series. If you're with us in person today, please note that the speaker is being filmed by a camera at the back of the room, so just be cautious if you're walking by. And this recording will eventually be available in our collection on DVD, and anybody can check it out. The Zoom recording of today's program will be available on our YouTube page as early as next week. Finally, thank you to our audience. Thank you for building momentum for this series year after year and for showing up today both in person and on Zoom. This is our first year back in person since 2020 and our first series that we're hosting hybrid. So thank you in advance for your patience while we navigate our hybrid programs. If you're joining us on Zoom today, please note that this is a Zoom webinar, so you cannot unmute or turn on your camera, but you can use the chat and the Q&A features. Once the program begins, we'll go into screen sharing the visuals, so don't worry if you can't see them yet, you will. And if you would like to enable closed captioning, you can enable that on your device at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A at any point during the talk. At the end of the presentation, my colleague Jack will facilitate that Q&A. This year's Town History Series is dedicated to Sheila Spear. Sheila volunteered for the History Room indexing obituaries for our memory database, and she was the first town administrator of Rouseck until her retirement in 2022. At last year's Town History Series, Sheila represented Rouseck and presented Gift for Purchase, Relation to the Land, Rouseck 1717. Sheila passed away this fall and is greatly missed by her community. Our speaker today represents the Woolwich Historical Society. Allison Hepler is a Woolwich resident, a state representative for House District 53, a town select woman, and a board member for the Patent Free Library, the Woolwich Historical Society, and Main Spur Ship. Did I get everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
And until recently, Allison was a professor at the University of Maine, Farmington, and a published author. That might be everything, maybe. Last year, Allison presented on the history of Montsweek Farm. We're so pleased to welcome her back today to the Patent Free Library for today's talk on summer camps. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Morning. Can you hear me on Zoom? Oh, morning out, Zoom people. How many of you went to summer camp? Raise your hand. Okay, so good number of you. Some of these pictures that you'll see are things that you probably are not allowed in summer camps anymore. But I started out, I knew nothing about summer camps in Maine until I was on a train back from Philadelphia to Maine, having just deposited a paper version of my PhD dissertation. Had nothing to do for the whole summer, sat down next to a young woman who opened up her planner and was writing down all sorts of things. Found out she was coming to lead a camp up in Maine. Until then, I had no idea that the woods of Maine are filled with young children from elsewhere mostly. So I also want to give a shout out to the Coffin family in Woolwich, the Willard family in Woolwich, in Dresden, the Milam family, members of the Woolwich Historical Society Board, including Debbie Locke, who put together a lot of materials that I ended up using, the Patent Free Library and the Maine Memory Network. So, wait, okay. There we go. So summer camps for kids emerged in the late 1800s as an antidote to urban life. Think about it. Cities were crowded, they were dirty, just beginning to adopt modern sanitation methods and paved streets. Think Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Summer camps, however, were not aimed at the poor kids who lived there or worked in the factories or sweatshops. For white middle-class kids, it was the proximity to the danger that was at risk. City life with its modern conveniences made boys in particular, not only, in close proximity to the risk, but made boys weakly, weakly. Think Theodore Roosevelt, right? His childhood of asthma and physical illness. As an adult, his emphasis on manliness took him out west to the rough and ready work of cattle herding. But he wasn't the only one. So the antidote to this softness, and this is just an idyllic picture of Woolwich, and the comfort of modern life was life in the quote unquote natural world. Of course, it was a romanticized view of nature and a structured natural world. In 1876, the North Mountain School of Physical Culture claimed it would take, quote, weekly boys out into camp life in the woods so that the pursuit of health could be combined with practical knowledge outside usual academic lines. And New England camps were no different. 8 to 10 weeks at Squam Lake in New Hampshire, Stowe, Massachusetts, upstate New York. Camp kids participated in various aspects of pioneer life, cutting firewood with an axe, for instance. They also learned self-reliance, learned how to handle a boat and to swim and hike. By 1900, more than 20 camps existed. By 1925, there were more than 1,000. This is where we're going to be. Brushwood Road is off of, basically, we're in Bath here. Well, Middle Road, Hunter River Road, down Brushwood Road, and is Boothbay Camp for boys, which is confusing because it's in Woolwich. And then further up River Road was Merrymeeting Camp for girls, and I'll get more into detail of that. And main camps were in the mainstream in terms of what summer camps were for. Again, at least for white middle-class campers, boys and girls. A few Jewish camps populated Maine as early as 1902. Camp Cobbossee in Winthrop, Camp Wigwam in Harrison, and Camp Songo in Casco. Atwater Camp was founded in Brookfield, Massachusetts for Black campers, and the Salvation Army and the YWCA and other religious organizations founded camps for lower income kids and also kids with disabilities. This is Boothbay Camp for Boys, again in Woolwich in the Kennebec. Founded by Arthur Ray Webster in 1913. He was from Cincinnati and bought Thorn Island offshore from Brushwood Lodge in the Kennebec, 3 miles from Bath. 3 years later, a mile upriver, he started Merrymeeting Camp for girls on the grounds of what's now Chop Point School on the Kennebec. Again, this one's on sort of what I call the corner of the Kennebec River, right? It's Merrymeeting Bay, it's Chops Creek, it's the Kennebec, it's also the Androscoggin. And most of the campers came from Ohio, which is where Mr. Webster was from. Thorn Island is about 9 acres, and Merrymeeting Camp is about 50 acres of woods and fields. Here's a couple of photos of the buildings at Merrymeeting Camp that are still around. And I don't know what year that is. This one, we might be able to figure it out. I'm thinking late 20s, early 30s, according to the car. Looks like I finally figured out this morning when I was looking at this that they're kind of circled around the flagpole. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong one. The camps were of interest to the locals. This article on the left announcing the arrival of the girls in the first year, and the one on the right recounting a blaze on the grounds of Merrymeeting Camp. The girls' camp had not yet opened, but boys from Boothbay, according to this article, showed up by boat with buckets and doused the flames. I know, right? And I include this because I heard a story about a fire probably late 70s from Amanda Martin, who grew up in Days Ferry. There was a fire on Thorn Island. Her father, Bruce Montgomery, saw it. He had a small boat. The Woolwich firefighters had no boat to get up there. And so he offered to take them up in his 18-foot West Pointer. They carried with them an old pump that had been Navy surplus. And they were close, when they got close enough to the blaze, they turned on this pump, and it turned out that shooting 250 gallons a minute of water shot the boat back. And they could net you with a 50 horsepower motor. They could not get close enough. And so the building burned to the ground. Not for lack of trying. This is a picture of the Boothbay waterfront, and I was curious, it's like, who are these camps aimed at? And for boys, an early message focused on fathers who don't have time to spend time with their sons. Quote, parents and boys want something different from the city hotel, summer resort, or limousine life. Modern businesses don't allow for long vacations, which makes it impossible for fathers to be chums to their boys. Pointedly, Boothbay Camp, quote, helps the boy from the well-to-do or wealthy home who has little chance to think or do for himself, even more than the boy from the poorer homes who has had to fight out some of his own problems. Oh my. Yeah, right. One 1928 brochure was more blunt. With due respect to the efforts of all parents, lads arrive at the camp with greatly distorted ideas of life and its problems. They arrive with many minor faults, unqualified in many ways to take their place with the average American-blooded boy. And I'm wondering if this was due to, I know there was a lot of discussion about the unpreparedness of young men during World War I. And this was maybe an effort, maybe the camp sort of oriented that towards making them more fit. Another early message was to attract only boys of good character, to develop friendship, teach boys the finer things in life, and live a bigger and better life. For girls, Merrymeeting Camp's aim was for, quote, girls who care for a simple life in the woods. The invigorating air and sunshine of Maine are unrivaled, building unusual health-giving qualities. In many cases, it is essential that growing girls be given a complete change and occupation after a year of confinement in the schoolroom. Parents are coming to recognize the advantages of freedom. Summer camp offers that balance and solves parents' problems who don't have time to take them all on vacation. In addition to good health, the camp teaches loyalty and the crowning gift of friendship. It also keeps girls out of trouble, teaching them to meet the problem of leisure time once they return home to school and home. So what did they do? And I talked to a couple of you earlier. For both camps, physical activity was the focus for campers. This is, again, this is Boothbay. You can see a variety of canoes. There's a sailboat, and it's like one of the launches right there. It was to build up, athletics were an important part of Boothbay Camp. Build up the body, but also strengthen the mind and instill the best ideals of sportsmanship. The camp, and so you got points for absolutely everything that you did, both as individuals and also in groups, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so everyone participated in every sport, which actually kind of fosters cooperation, right? Because the better skilled boys would have to, would be incentivized, I guess, to help the ones who were less experienced, and because everybody got points towards their team. Physical activity was also a major part of Merrymeeting Camp for girls. In 1931, the brochure says they taught girls to, quote, develop in their sports and to play correctly and skillfully. In all of the literature, there's also a desire by the camp to, quote, exhibit that spirit of real sportsmanship, to win or lose with only the kindliest feelings of general comradeship. In 1935, they further de-emphasized the competition part and instead stressed interests, hobbies, and habits, which will be of critical use for girls even through adulthood. In addition to physical activities, the camp stressed nature, art appreciation, crafts, and music. And as a historian of women, I was not especially surprised at the physical fitness part of this. By the early 20th century, there was widespread knowledge about the benefits of girls being active. What surprised me was in all of the literature was the lack of any rhetoric about how developing these camp skills will benefit these girls and young women as wives and mothers. I didn't see it at all, and even into the 1950s. And in fact, here's the 1956 brochure. It marks a real change. But the new owners were Alan and Margaret Dow from Needham, Massachusetts. They brought a more explicit Christian focus. For the first time, you see that. But again, that's the only place it occurs. Their brochure uses terms like women's graciousness, which has a gender definition. And yet the image, look at the images of what women were doing in the upper left. It shows a horsewoman, a reader, a student, and a public speaker. Again, nothing about, being any kind of domestic life. And it surprised me, especially in the 1950s, but it also reinforces some research that I have done in the past. On the 1950s is not so much June Cleaver as has been portrayed. And if you don't know who June Cleaver is, ask someone who's older than you. 1956 also includes specific references to democracy, which is for the first time. And given the Cold War, this is both notable, but it's also pretty mainstream. So this is how the camps were organized. They were organized by named tribes, described by the camp director as similar to a fraternity. Tribal references were more prominently displayed at Boothbay camp, but you also see it at Merrymeeting camp. At Boothbay, the campers were organized into Hockomoks, Kennebecks, Penobscots, Saginaws. The weekly council fire was serious business, which you can see up here on the right. The council fire further divided campers into warriors, who were described as the outstanding campers and designated by wearing 2 feathers. 1-feathered braves, or those who fine campers, redskins, or good campers in their blankets and colored headbands, and the unblanketed pale faces, described as new campers or those who have not caught the Boothbay spirit. Other participants included a counselor known as Big Chief, a medicine man and snake doctor for entertainment and song, and a heap big chief who closed the ceremony with a prayer. At Merrymeeting camp, which I don't have any pictures of, there's an account of the camp director, Alan Dow, transforming himself into Chief Gray Eagle, complete with an Indian suit and a Sioux headdress, common in Maine. And here's a description in the brochure. He leads the Indian maidens in games and skills that have long been enjoyed by youthful Indians. With magic known only to the Indian chiefs, he lights the campfire with fireballs from heaven or with buried fires. Sometimes he can bring forth fire just by blowing on the logs. Around these campfires, he tells stories of the bravery of the great Indians. Chief Gray Eagle always closes his evenings by calling all in the Omaha tribal prayer. So there's a lot of scholarship today on the use and appropriation of Indigenous people's culture, and some of it involves summer camps, where many camps use the rural and natural world to mimic activities of people they believed to be more primitive, right? Especially in a world that was rapidly industrializing. In many ways, it's also a romanticized version of Indigenous people's history and actual experiences. And although it's been used well into the 21st century, it's inappropriate today. I don't think I need to say that to this crowd, but in no way was this perspective and these activities unique to Maine camps. But it does provide a way to show Maine camps in a wider perspective. This was not something that was uncommon. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So what did they do? We've seen pictures of baseball. I don't have any pictures of basketball, but they also do volleyball, track and field, which you see here. The 2 pictures up here are the boys doing looks like getting ready for some race. A high jump of some sort down here. We see something that's called picket. It's, as you can tell, the girls laid on their backs, and are you familiar? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And then some kind of calisthenics. They also, horseback riding was very popular, more at Chalk Point, where there were lots of trails than at Boothbay camp. Was archery and a rifle range for boys who had brought their own guns and brought them to camp. Who knew, right? There was also folk dancing and gymnastics. I don't know whether the picture of that was some sort of gymnastics or not, but also tennis and sailing were added. There we go. In the late 1930s, there's an opportunity to learn sports that have what they call a carryover value. In other words, sports that had a social value that carried beyond camp. It's something you do beyond just camp, right? So that's at Boothbay camp. That's at Merrymeeting camp. I don't know how you could concentrate on tennis with such a great view. But that's what I guess not, right? And sailing. What a great place to learn about the water, other than the Kennebec. I'll also get back to canoeing. And that actually brings me to a point I wanted to talk about, the reliance on the water. It's worth noting that even after the Carlton Bridge opened in 1927, most kids arrived to camp by boat. It was just 3 miles up the river from Bath, 4 miles to Chalk Point. And so this was, this is a picture of the boys on one of the launches. There's also sailboats there. They use the motor launches for excursions to Popham Beach, for instance, to Boothbay and to Pemaquid. There's two other pictures of the launch, which is just, I just think is lovely. I love the idea of going by transportation, like boat transportation to Bath. They would go to church on Sundays by boat. Bath was sometimes seen as civilization for the girls, especially after a multi-day outing, camping, hiking, canoeing. Canoes, well, they took canoes very seriously as well. The many physical activities were oriented around the water. Both boys and girls were trained to handle the canoes, including a safe wet exit and returning to the boat, something that I have not mastered yet, and did multiple day and overnight canoe trips, including annual ones to the Cavasi County, and they experienced all the joys and tribulations that we face today as canoeists, right? Camping in the rain, portaging, canoes and gear, sunburn, mosquitoes, the whole bit. They also canoed in the Belgrade Lakes, took day trips. I mean, think about where they were. They took day trips to Nequasit, up the Androscoggin, the Eastern River to Dresden, Richmond, Swan Island. One of my favorite trips that they talk about is Kennebec into the Sasanoa through Upper Hell's Gate, Hockomock Bay, down the back river to Robin Hood, and then across to Sheepscot. You know, a couple of us have probably done that. And the canoes were, they had a lot of them. I don't know that they do canoes so much anymore. They might be more kayak oriented, but I think it's a great opportunity here. They took both, one of the things that's probably not done today. Both, this is at Boothbay Camp. And also the sailing in the beautiful Kennebec. Merrymeeting Camp took swimming very seriously, and I assume Boothbay did too. Girls took lessons or bathing caps. Actually, just so you know, the girls also had a water slide. They had caps based on what skill level they had, and that indicated also where they could swim. There was the bay and the river, but also there was a tidal pool that they could swim in that didn't have the same risks that the Kennebec did. They were taught 4 strokes: crawl, trungeon, side stroke, and breaststroke. Trungeon, I learned, is a combination of the crawl, where you for the arms, where you do the overhand, and then a scissors kick for the feet. I have not tried this, but maybe she has. And they use the slide nearly every day. I love these pictures of the, I think that's somebody that just flashed in, somebody getting ready to take off the diving area. They instituted a council of boldfish for girls who passed 18 water tests and strokes, 5 dives, exhibited control of the canoe, and passed the Red Cross lifesaver class. There's another picture. This is just, isn't that amazing? I could never take a picture like that, just because I wouldn't be it. So the newsletter, which I'll talk about, that was produced, has a couple of stories about about swimming and the helpful aspects of water. This is a prescription for lethargy that appeared in the newsletter. Patent medicine advertisement. Are you tired, depressed? Do you get up in the morning feeling gloomy and worn out, without pep to begin the day? Have you lost that vitality so essential to popularity? Do you go to breakfast still half asleep? Do your cabin mates wish you would improve your disposition? If any of these ailments are yours, then what you need, friends, is a daily dose of my marvelous medicine, that superb aid to human welfare, that scientific blend of nature's own elixirs compounded in my private laboratory, that wonderful remedy whose formula is known only to me. In short, my friends, what you need is Dr. Kennebec's special prescription dip. Take daily before breakfast, results guaranteed immediately. Give it a trial. You can't lose. Remember the name, just 3 letters, VIP. And begin taking it tomorrow. Signed, Dr. Kennebec. This is written by one of the students. And then the method by which you achieve that was written in an article called How to Wake Up. Having dashed madly down the hill for the first swim, you arrive on the float, eager and out of breath. You immediately cast off a heavy sweater, a bathrobe, and a towel, and come forth fully attired in a happy yard of swimming suit. Then you approach the water expectantly, now ready for the first step. First step, approach the water with a swagger. Second step, you daintily put one toe in the water. Third step, withdraw the toe with a faint shiver. Fourth step, put the whole foot in the water and let out a huge shriek. Withdraw the fifth step, withdraw a foot, and don light apparel consisting of formerly mentioned sweater, bathrobe, and towel. Post-mortem, did you then trudge jauntily up the hill, quite self-satisfied? We also see pictures of this one in particular is probably not something that is done now. This is some sort of water safety exercise that's on the dock. This is what they call aquaplaning. It looks like just one board, and I don't know enough about water skiing to know whether this was a precursor probably to water skiing. Oops. But it's clear the natural world entranced many of the campers at Merrymeeting. Hiking on the Top Point Peninsula was quite a common activity, picking blueberries, bird watching, other sorts of nature walks, treasure hunts. Pine Grove at Merrymeeting Camp was a popular place for meetings and Sunday supper, and that's where that is. And I guess this rock, according to Debbie, is like right on the edge of that. Sort of, yeah. So the camps, each cabin put on lots of theatrical performances throughout the summer. In one case, they would often dress up the dining hall, but also decorated some of the canoes as pirate ships and battleships, which I don't have any pictures of. There's another one, and not quite sure what it looks like, some sort of dance. Right? They were very clever. They didn't have a lot of stuff, right? So they had to make do with what they brought, and so it shows a lot of creativity. They also did crafts. This is weaving on the right. I don't know what it is on the left. I'd like to think it's rope making, but I can't really tell. Lanyard making. Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, that's the old lanyard. Okay. They occasionally had what they call, an old town Indian woman who came and did a basket weaving class. Lots of activities also were co-ed. And so you had lots of performances, other sorts of activities. And one of them was a minstrel show, including boys and girls putting these on. For those of you who don't know, minstrel shows were performances by white people, usually men with blackened faces and other makeup to satirize and demean Black people with song and dance. Black people were often portrayed as foolish and ignorant. And to be clear, this was but one event of the summer, but it's also important to know that these were common. They were common in the popular culture of the time. Other co-ed events included a clam bake. In 1945, there was a clam eating contest where the girls beat the boys. Merrymeeting campers took first and second place, downing 95 and 85 clams respectively. I don't know what the time frame was. And I love this comment from one camper, should surprise no one. For some campers, it was their first experience eating clams, and for some, it was their last. You know who you are. There was also a shore dinner trip, which I was fascinated by. Apparently not everybody went because shellfish was not their cup of tea, but they would take the boat to Bath and then hop on a trolley to go out to the New Meadows Inn for a shore dinner of lobsters, clams, and scallops. There was also a boy-girl dance. One girl noted that boys grew taller than the boys of the same age, so they were often looking down at their head when they would dance. And while the campers, in the literature, the campers seemed to look forward to this annual event, it's not clear that they were having a lot of fun. So I want to read a typical week This is one of the newsletters from 1931, and this is the week's log. This is a week. Monday, early morning ride to Bath, tennis tournaments, campfire was a study of stars, most interesting and instructive. Tuesday, tournament volleyball game and swimming meet. Strangely enough, there was a tie score in swimming. Boothbay party in the evening, birthday party, in the evening with stunts from each season. Wednesday, part of camp left by boat and part by truck for Augusta, where we had dinner inside of the State House. After doing the town in the approved manner, the older girls came home by truck, while the boat took the rest of the crowd to Gardner, where the night was spent at the old Colburn shipyard. That's for you, Mr. Stevens. Thursday, the day began at 4:30 for some very young ladies. After a grand breakfast on the shore, we came home where a dip before dinner was the most welcome thing in the day. A marshmallow roast finished the day. Friday, more tournaments. After a lunch, White Mountains preliminary hike, because that was one of their trips, from Fowles Landing to the other side of the Chops and back in the Nautilus, which was one of the motorboats. Just at dusk came the July council fire, and how lovely and impressive it was. Saturday, still more tournaments. In the afternoon, the whole camp went to a play day with Boothbay. Good food and good fun made it a great success for the day. Sunday, another glorious Sunday, and our luck holds. Time changed again, but Miss Vin was kind-hearted and let us have our usual amount of sleep. Mr. Hillier was with us at Vespers, and in his kindly way gave us a very inspiring talk. A pretty busy day, busy week, busy summer. That was a typical week. They also took trips, as I mentioned. I would love to take a trip in one of these vehicles. This is a picture of the Boothbay boys heading to the White Mountains. This was from 1921 accounts. The boys piled into a truck in Bath, stopped at the Poland Spring bottling plant. It took them all day to get to a small town in New Hampshire. No kidding. They apparently passed a large number of automobiles from Ohio, which also surprised me, and the group gave each one a big welcome. I had no idea there were that many cars in New England in 1921. The next day, they climbed Madison, hiked across John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Jefferson, and Clay, which is the president I have not heard of, and arrived in Washington by the evening. Here they slept in the garage, glad that the chains attached to the building kept the building from blowing away. They woke up to 39-degree weather, not unusual at Mount Washington, then hiked Monroe, Clinton, and Pleasant, and finally back to Crawford. The White Mountains were also a popular destination for the Merrymeeting campers as well. Popham was a common day trip, and they would take that by motor launch as well for both the boys and the girls. Another trip was because most of them came from Ohio. Some of them made an adventure of the voyage to Maine. They'd get on the train in Cincinnati or elsewhere in Ohio, go to Buffalo, another train to Niagara, and then boarded a boat that took them to Toronto, where they'd spend a day, and then to Montreal, where they'd spend a day or two. And then they get on a train, go down to Bath, to Portland, and then to Bath. We used to do a lot by train. This is the vehicle that the girls took to Quebec. 1933 was a road trip over the old Arnold Trail. And I love seeing this. I mean, you can see the luggage, the clothing. This was, I think, the last year that Serge bloomers were on the list of clothes to bring. And I just love it. And somebody pointed out, like, oh, did all those girls fit in that vehicle? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a bench across probably something that does not happen today. Right. They also took trips to Montegan, to Pemaquid, one trip to Bar Harbor and climbing Mount Cadillac. Talks about battleships safe at anchor in 1933. I don't know enough about the Bar Harbor history or whether there were battleships there in 1933 or they were referring to other types of boats, but I thought that was interesting. Maybe Mr. Woodford knows the answer to that. No, or not now. Yeah.
Probably a visit of a naval squadron.
Yeah. Oh, okay. These pictures did not come from the sources from the brochures, but Maine Historical Society. They also visited DIW boat launching. Here's one I have from written by a child 1940 newsletter from, about a launching from the perspective of the launch boat. Dear fellow boats, have you ever been to a launching? Well, I expect most of you have, but I hadn't, so I'll proceed to tell you about my experiences yesterday. I woke up bright and early feeling marvelous with a brand new coat of paint. But one thing that bothered me was this. I was in a slanting position with only a few ropes to hold me. Queer, I thought, but oh well. And I was once more puzzled when I saw crowds of people standing around my back, and I was so surprised when a lady standing on the platform in front broke a bottle right across my fresh paint, and I slid down into the water so fast that I almost lost my balance and went down to Davy Jones's locker. And then when I was pulled by two tugs, I have never been so humiliated in my life. So that's a launching, I thought, breaks the boat. The picture on the right is this, the Arctic schooner Bowden. These are pictures from 1926. The boys got to go help load cargo onto the boat. And actually one of the crew members that they visited was a former counselor from Boothbay. Sunday was kind of a down day. With most campers either heading to Bath for church or a local church in West Woolwich, which I haven't yet identified. I love one account of a girl who, along with her friend, was invited to sing at a church in Woolwich. The pews had just been varnished and apparently were still a little sticky. Every time they stood up, she described a very audible scrunch as their freshly starched dresses separated themselves from the pews. We also see here Sunday services were held in the Pine Grove, and evening vespers were a regular event. I was interested in where they lived, and fortunately, so were the people putting these brochures together. Camps. I mean, some of they're nothing fancy. These they have some of the beds are metal, some of them are wood. Lots of windows, screens. Foot lockers, which is something I went to college with. And this is the girls. You can see, I think in this picture, there's some graffiti on the walls. Usually paint, often the girls would paint their names on there. We'll also see some more pictures of that from the Boothbay camp. And more pictures. And more pictures. This is the first one I've seen of a bunk bed. And so the cabins, I was asking Bill Milam about how old, whether these cabins were here when Mr. Webster bought it. And you refer to, there's at least one foundation that has a 1906 stone.
That's at Brushwood.
At Brushwood, oh, okay, not it, okay. So I don't know much about like when these cabins were built. But campers were also expected to keep them clean. They also, another chore was they had to keep, they did their share of mealtime chores. This is a dining hall at Boothbay. Counselors would occasionally dress up the dining hall special with sprigs of evergreen and flowers and sometimes a theme like the Japanese garden. That was not at Boothbay, that was more likely to be at Merrymeeting. Food description. Campers raved about the food, noting with some pride that the average weight gain over the summer was 10 to 15 pounds. And no wonder, here's a description of a banquet. Platters of roast beef, roast chicken, roast veal, bowls of mashed potatoes, gravy, baked beans, scrambled eggs, codfish balls, lobster salad, pitchers of creamy whole milk, giant pans of home-baked cakes, rolls, biscuits, donuts, muffins, and pie. Camp brochures were also consistently clear to parents, don't spend candy. I think this was probably more of an issue at Merrymeeting. The camp lamented receiving 10 to 15 pounds regularly a day of candy, which they shared with everyone. And one day, I guess it was a record of 55 pounds in one day. Yeah. They don't need it. They got it. This is a picture from Merrymeeting Merrymeeting camp, and a couple of campers talk about a Black woman named Laura Parsons who spent the winter in Boston, but was a regular cook at Merrymeeting camp for years. Many recall her hot dish call to campers. In a short memoir written by Mr. Webster, he said that Parsons had also managed to put 7 nieces and nephews and 2 neighborhood boys through college. According to one former camper reminiscing about camp, Laura's Sunday morning meal of codfish balls and baked beans and donuts was a big treat, especially since this occurred during rationing days of World War II, where the same memoir writer talking about meals of spam being common. So I was also interested in what they wore. And here's just a variety of pictures. I was looking at the list of things to bring. As I mentioned, 1934 was the last year that sturdy bloomers were on the list, and then in 1940 included gym suits, which some of us were talking about before this. But mostly the clothes you see are blue shorts or white shorts and white shirts. For a couple of years, flat dance shoes were on the list, but that disappeared quickly. And you never know. I mean, they obviously brought dresses for church. We don't know what, what they actually brought. Like I said, they did a lot with not very much. So I don't think they brought an overabundance of clothes. This is some newsletter covers. The camp, when you're doing the research like this, you're looking at brochures which are aimed at parents, and often what they want to happen and what they claim will happen, but not always what will happen and what does happen. You get the idea more of the camp directors than the campers themselves. And so this was a weekly newsletter that came out, and they had the articles like the one I read of the boat launch and the Dr. Kennebec description. And it's a great way to get a sense of what girls were thinking about. We also see in the Merrymeeting Moon, we do see a reference to the Cold War once. And we also see hints that boys and girls talked about some of these wider issues. These campers were coming to Maine in the 1920s, throughout the Depression, during World War II, and the early years of the Cold War. One newsletter talks about how the cold camp was an antidote to the fears that were created by the threat of nuclear holocaust in the Cold War. Another place I found, and this was thanks to Roger Berry of the Coffin family, is some photos of the graffiti on the cabin walls that also sort of indicates what they were really, thinking about. One of them is that I don't have a photo of, is of celebrating VJ Day in 1945. There was also some political commentary aimed against Democrats. The crazy Dems down with FDR was another one. And although most of those campers did not come from Maine, Mainers know that FDR never won a presidential election in Maine. So there's also one reference in the Merrymeeting Moon newsletter. In 1933, they had this, a quote, "The Piggly Wiggly girls," and that was a name of a cabin of girls, "had a hard time party. It is to be hoped that times never get as hard as they were pictured. Burlap sacks, newspaper dresses, and even barrels appeared." And so clearly they were seeing these things, that they know they knew how to portray them. The newsletter, should be clear by the parts that I've read so far. A quick imagination, a sense of humor, a deep love of nature. There's lots of references of the natural world that they're seeing around them. And another example of their cleverness was in the newsletter. It's and most of them were those 11 by 17. This is the only one that I found that's this size. And I also have here. This is one that actually appeared on my desk at home one day. I don't think I took it from anybody or from the library, but anyway. It's one of the brochures that I had from Merrymeeting Moon, we had The improved camper at home, aimed at girls who are going back home. Number 1, yawns promptly at 9:30 p.m. 2, has every available freckle out. 3, shocks parents by calling spaghetti worms. 4, sticks her gum on the wall at night. 5, always saves her cereal spoon. 6, wipes off crumbs after eating. 7, boldly asks for fifths. Forgets the use of the bathtub. Finds it much more comfortable to prop feet on chairs and tables than on the floor. And lastly, can't sleep because of the vastness of the bed. And, you also see in those newsletters, entries, written articles from the Camp Mouse. One of them in here talks about how the campers need to be, I've taught my kids, says the mouse, to say please and thank you. These campers ought to be saying that as well. There's also Lawrence the Spider, the Clubhouse Chipmunk, all contributed articles to the Merrymeeting Moon. And even my favorite, Shifty the Canoe Paddle, contributed an article complaining that girls just slapped me around in the water. So I had mentioned a couple times Brushwood Road, and Brushwood Lodge was a camp that was aimed at they called it adult camp, which is not really what well, I guess it is. Parents would drop their kids off at camp. This was on the mainland down Brushwood Road, north of Days Ferry on off of River Road. And so parents would stay there after dropping their kids off. Brushwood was also owned by Mr. Webster and run by a good friend of his, Arch McCartney. McCartney bought it when Webster closed Boothbay Camp in 1956, and the Milam family, and Arch was Bill and Mark Milam's grandfather, then acquired Brushwood. Arthur Berry acquired Thorn Island in the 1960s, and the Coffin family acquired it in 1984. So Merrymeeting Camp for Girls became Chalk Point Camp, and now Chalk Point Camp and School. Dean and Peter Willard bought Merrymeeting Camp from the Dow family in 1966. As Jean recalls, at 50 acres for $50,000, they couldn't afford it. She remembers praying for a way out of the sale, and but Peter at the same time was praying for a way to be able to go forward and buy the place. As we know, Peter's prayer was answered, thanks to, and the Dow's owner financed the place. The buildings were sound, but the cohort of campers had dwindled to 1. So they were basically starting over. The Dows had apparently, who owned it for 10 years, had suffered a family tragedy, and for a number of years, just art was not in it. So in addition to need to rebuild the population of campers, the Kennebec was also in really bad shape. Right? Industrial pollution had turned it into a world of fish kills and green water. Nevertheless, they opened a co-educational Chalk Point camp in 1967 and continued many of the same activities. Tennis, swimming, canoeing, sailing, volleyball, arts and crafts. One early brochure was specifically aimed at teenagers and stressed outdoor activities. Saying this, the age group needs a program all its own, speaking to teenagers, and a well-rounded program of recreation, work, and education integrated with the all-important spiritual dimension. Our goal is to guide young people to live life on the highest plane. So Chalk Point's focus was and remains rooted in the Christian faith, but it has always attracted campers from a wide variety of religious and non-religious backgrounds. And according to its current website, quote, small group discussions are held in the cabins after breakfast, where a chapter or passage of one of the Gospels is discussed. The atmosphere is relaxed and campers are encouraged to state their views and opinions and ask questions. It's important to note that while Chalk Point Camp puts its religious philosophy up front in its literature, the perspectives of Merrymeeting Camp and Boothbay Camp, even if less, basically unstated, was also Christian, regardless of whether the Websters and the Dows owned it. Campers, like I said, went to Sunday school, attended church services in the area, and Vespers in the evening. Campers today to Chalk Point Camp come from all over the world, unlike mostly Ohio, and it also attracts a good number of local kids, which is also different. You look at the list of campers from Merrymeeting and Boothbay camp. There are very few campers from the local area. There's a lot of counselors and cooks and doctors and nurses and whatnot, but not campers. Child Point Camp now offers 2 3-week sessions, or campers can attend a full 6-week session ending in early August. Child Point opened a school as May, in 1987. Many residents remember and see annual car washes in town by Child Point School, number of community service projects. In addition, the school has developed long-lasting relationships with groups in Bangladesh and Nicaragua, where students have traveled and worked. And some of the buildings are still here, as you can tell. So thanks for indulging my trip up the Kennebec this morning. And what I loved about doing this research was reinforcing the natural beauty and the love of outdoors that we all love about living here. And I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed sharing it with these youngsters. And I welcome your questions. Thanks for your time.